I just go with Mr. Bain first. Can you tell us about what is fatherhood for you in terms of its functions and what makes you a father?
Sure. So I have 2 kids, one's 7 and my son is 9. So yeah, I can definitely relate when you say like it's a bit tricky, like in the early days when you kind of like you got this life now and all of a sudden you're responsible for something you had no idea about. So I don't know, for Beck and I, my wife and I, we always just stayed curious and like threw it around with a whole bunch of friends in the same boat. So I used to catch up with some other dads. We all worked from home, and we'd every Tuesday morning we'd get out the strollers and we'd walk around the river together, and just say, hey, like, how much sleep have you been getting? and kind of just throw out techniques or whatever that worked. And that, I found that was really helpful, because a lot of dads, like you say, like you've got all the mums groups, there's no dads groups, and even the ones that are, you know, meeting and stuff, like it's a bit, for whatever reason, like we don't open up as much, generally speaking, dads, about just, you know, what it's like to change diapers, or do you get up through the night and help out with your, you know, like, do you like kind of how do you approach getting up through the night and all those kind of things? But yeah, I don't know, like it's really good to be able to have a space like that. I found that really helpful. Steve?
Yeah, I got 2 young lads, one nearly 14 and the other one's 11 going 35 tomorrow, and then back to 2 the next. He's all over the shop. Early on in the piece, I decided I was done, and my wife was she was even done before me. So I was only 29 when we made the decision that we wouldn't be having any more. But yeah, it's an interesting ride. We were fairly lonely in the very early stages when the boys were very young. In the radio scene, we were travelling around from market to market, and so yeah, family wasn't around. So we had to wing it by ourselves a lot of the time. Most of the time, there were friendships formed at churches that we would go along the way. But yeah, it's I've had this discussion with a couple of people, in fact, just this week, that my wife and I are pretty solid, but 9 out of 10 discussions,
right,
that we would have, 9 of them would be involved around one of our children,
right? Yeah,
the younger one more so. So yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging when you're sometimes not on the same page. But
yeah, certainly pushing all those buttons, right?
Timmy C.
Hello. Yeah, some good points from both of you there, actually. I really struggled with fatherhood initially. I found the first 3 to 4 months really tough. And part of that was just because I'm selfish, and not being able to get to the gym when I wanted and do what I wanted. I was like, oh, all of a sudden there's this other life that needs me. So I once I settled into that and accepted that, yeah, I actually loved it. I loved every stage of it. I'm at a different stage now where I've got an almost 22-year-old son and an almost 21-year-old daughter. So I'm at the other end of things where it's almost like you're kind of like a coach now. You're not really, I mean, you're still dad, but as far as, you know, the day-to-day grind of, you know, the school trips and the homeworks and the showers and the hot things and all that. I mean, my kids are, you know, adults and doing their own thing. So it's really just a kind of coaching thing now, which is actually really cool. It's a completely different stage, but I actually really love it. And I think a good reminder too, to savor the moments you have when you're under the same roof and not negate the impact that you do have by just being around. I think presence is a huge thing as dads, and you don't have to always be doing something amazingly fun and cool and expensive, but just your presence in your kids' lives, ultimately, I think is what they're after, and we can all vouch for that for ourselves, I suppose, if we've had that in our own lives. It's the memories that we make with our kids, not how much we spend and how much whatever. Like, it's, you know, the little things that you look back on and go, I loved it when we did that, or remember when that happened, or, you know, like, and it's just present. So, and that, I think, for me, particularly with my daughter, because my son's is a whole other story, and we'll get maybe get into that. I don't know if you need that story or not, but yeah, as far as my daughter is concerned, like, the closeness that we've got now is a direct result of just being there and consistently showing up as a dad, but also not being afraid to share my own heart and stories and emotions and fears with my daughter. Like, we've kept it pretty real over the years. And so now that's the sort of relationship that we have, where she feels like she can come to me with her stuff. You know, and that's really cool. I love that. I love that she feels safe enough, and Dad's a safe space and a cool space that she actually wants to pick up the phone and have conversation with me. So yeah, it's cool.
That's awesome, Tim. And I think, you know, that's one thing that you know, is really helpful to hear from people who have a bit longer journey being a father, is just that investment time up front. But also, you know, I appreciate you being vulnerable and open, that, you know, it was tough at the start, but also take a next step further. You told us why that was, and it was, you know, from your perspective, you were, you know, missing out or grieving those things that you really wanted to do, and you probably did a lot more of when you were single or didn't have dependence. So that kind of, you know, you said selfishness, and I think there's an element of selfishness in all of us that we have to let go of in that process of becoming a father. And it's exciting to see when I think most people do get the opportunity to transition from realizing that and then embracing it. You see people who fight it the whole time, and they don't have a great experience in fatherhood because they're always trying to get back. And probably to some extent we're all, you know, on the spectrum there. Any given day, you know, I just want to go out and go fishing, or I just want to go out and go for a surf or play golf. And there's elements of that which we all know is a healthy things to do at the right times, but, you know, it comes down to balance and time. So that's a really great share. And I think the thing that we do with Dad's Group is make spaces for this kind of chat, you know, and often with Dad's Group, it's dads and babies, so you don't get this depth of conversation. You get half conversations between vomits and changing nappies, etc. But it's nice to be able to have, you know, these discussions in a place where you're stopping for a moment in, you know, how long have you been a parent? Like 20 odd years. You're stopping for a moment, reflecting on that. And I might just jump across to Ken. What's your experience as a father been like, and when did you become a father?
My wife and I were married at least 20 years, I think, before we had Kobe. Kobe is our now 9-year-old, and I've only got one kid, just Kobe. And by that time, you know, I'm in my 40s, and he's born, and it's like, well, my wife and I have. We've done a lot together our whole lives, you know, just the two of us. And then along comes our son, and it was the best thing ever happened to me. So good. I was a born-again dad, really.
Dad. I haven't heard that one. I like it.
And it just gave me something that I was missing. And look, for me, when, like Tim was saying earlier, there's no handbook of being a dad and stuff like this. My old man, he bailed when I was 7. He left us when I was 7. So I didn't really even have a dad to look at and go, what's a dad supposed to be at that time? Yeah. So, you know, and my memories of it were quite, you know, back in those days, quite violent. What was a messy sort of breakup. But so when Kobe came, I mean, there's so many facets of what I should do as a dad, but the number one thing for me was not to do what happened to me. And so the number one thing was to be present, just be present in his life everywhere, and sit next to him while he goes through things and see what sort of, I didn't know what sort of kid's he going to be, what's his love language, what's that, how does, you know, what helps him, what doesn't help him. And, you know, so it was just sitting with him. And I still do that to this day, just go up and sit with him and just be in it, present, and spending time. Sometimes we say nothing, sometimes we have amazing deep talks, but the number one thing for me is to be a dad who's present in his life.
That's awesome, Ken. And I what I find is when we start talking about these, what you say or what someone else says might kind of spark something in someone else, and you can see them, sitting there and it's like, oh yeah, I really want to share that. And so if that happens, as we're all sharing, I'm not the guy that's the expert. I'm probably more the facilitator, and knowing that role for me is exciting because I'm not here to, pull out expertise and share expertise as much as I am to listen and be able to help all of us share our experiences in a way, and maybe being vulnerable and part of this group. I should share that I'm a father of 3, Evelyn Joy, Annabelle Pearl, and Joseph Emmanuel Rutherford, and they are 6, 3, and 1. So I'm in the thick of it at the moment, and yeah, just my experience fathering has been. I love it. At the moment, when they're all so young, it's quite challenging. Some of you probably remember those challenging times and challenging days, but it's also something that in the role that I do, I get to reflect on that and not to lose heart of the things that you guys have shared, which is being present, being able to connect with your child, knowing that that your presence with them and engaging with them. It's not about, you said the expensive holidays or the big gifts. It's about that time with their father that's important, and that's a challenge that I set for myself every day, and every day I succeed and every day I fail at the same time. So it's about sharing that with a group of peers that actually helps me and others through that.